In this lesson, we'll take a brief look at some of the different types of graphics you can expect to see on the integrated reasoning section of the GMAT. Now, while you're probably familiar with most of these graphics, you may have some uncertainty about Venn diagrams and scatter plots, so we've created separate, more detailed lessons for these graphics. Now, these are the graphics we'll be discussing, so let's begin with bar graphs. A bar graph, also known as a bar chart, features rectangular bars such that the length of each bar is proportional to the value it represents. Now, these bars can be plotted vertically or horizontally. Now, in some cases, a bar graph features bars divided into two or more pieces to show the relationship of each piece to the whole. For example, in this graph, we can see that in 1994, this organization created a total of 108 reports. A certain proportion of these reports were categorized as long reports, and the rest were categorized as easy reports. Okay, now let's take a look at line graphs. These graphs are very similar to bar graphs. In a bar graph, the length of a bar is proportional to the value it represents. In a line graph, the height of the line is proportional to the value it represents. So in the example shown here, the higher the line, the greater the number of science fair participants. Also notice that a line graph can have more than one line. In this case, we have 3 lines representing 3 different countries. We can also have hybrid graphs that are part bar graph and part line graph. In these instances, we have 2 different axes. So in this example, the left-hand axis indicates the scale of the bar graph, and the right-hand axis indicates the scale for the line graph. Alright, the next graphic to discuss is the pie chart. A pie chart, or circle graph, is a circular chart divided into sectors, where each sector indicates the relative share of a total amount. In the pie chart shown here, the entire pie represents all of the employment opportunities in Maltania, and each individual sector indicates the proportion of employment opportunities that fall into a certain category. For example, 47% of all employment opportunities fall into the category of management and business. Now, pie charts can also be used to compare 2 different situations. In this example, we're using pie charts to compare the breakdown of drinking water sources in 2005 to the breakdown of drinking water sources in 2010. Okay, moving along, the next graphic to discuss is the organizational chart. This is a type of graphic that shows the general structure of an organization, as well as the relationships and relative ranks of the positions within that organization. Now, since there are no universally accepted rules regarding organizational charts, any GMAT question involving this kind of graphic will be accompanied by text explaining any important features. Alright, the last graphic to discuss is the flowchart. A flowchart is a graphical means of describing or defining some process. This is accomplished with boxes representing steps or decisions in a whole series of steps or decisions. For example, here's a simple flowchart representing the process of dealing with a lamp that doesn't work. Notice that at some points there can be 2 different paths depending on the existing conditions. Here's another example of a flowchart that's more mathematical. This flowchart is essentially a step-by-step recipe that lets us input values of x and y, and after a series of steps, it outputs a value of b. So, for example, a question might give you a value of x and y and ask you to follow the given steps to find the corresponding value of b. Alright, so that's an overview of some of the different types of graphics to expect in the integrated reasoning section of the GMAT. In the next 2 lessons, we'll take a closer look at Venn diagrams and scatter plots.